Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Come on in, find a seat. We have something very special for you now. Hope you're enjoying CRS 22 so far. I'm Kurt Johnson, president of CRB, and I'm so happy that you are all here. We, this year, have launched, as you've seen, a Heads of State series. This is an opportunity for you to hear from the thought leaders, from the literal leaders of the largest broadcasting and media companies in our business, and from the heads of the large record labels to find out what is really going on. And I assure you, in the prep meetings I've seen, no punches will be pulled, and the interviewers will not as well. So you're going to get the real deal here today. This is the second of 6 of these. I encourage you to take in as many as you can because it's truly something special. So here to moderate this afternoon's session is a great friend of country radio for many years, the president of McVeigh Media Consulting, Mike McVeigh.
Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's exciting for me to bring out some of the big names that are going to join us today. And what you're going to hear from us today is John Esposito, Espo, as you all know, who is the CEO of Warner Music Nashville. We'll also be bringing out Bill Wilson, who is the CEO for Town Square Media. And so we're going to start with the first guest, who's a man who gave us all an amazing lunch today. As chairman and CEO of Warner Music, he's overseen the careers of Blake Shelton, Dan and Shay, Brett Eldridge, Gabby Barrett, and on and on. I love him because we're both Pittsburgh Steelers fans, and we grew up about 30 miles apart, he in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, so that town is famous for more than just the groundhog. He started his career by being in rock bands while in college, and was a professional musician for a short period of time. One of the things that I loved most is that he worked in the technical side, the electronic side, being at the Wiz and at Mitsubishi, which are not things you would think of. And he's another person who came from pop, rhythmic, hip-hop, working at Island Def Jam Music Group, where he oversaw acts like Jay-Z, DMX, Bon Jovi, Ja Rule, and so on. I could continue to sing his praises for a long time. I think everybody knows who this man is. I would like to, more than anything, welcome my friend and a great head of state for country music, John Esposito.
Hello, sunshine.
We have to make some room and get rid of this water for the scotch. That's going to make things a lot better here.
If we're going to do CRS, we're going to do it right. Damn it.
Yeah, there's applause. which is perfect. So while you're pouring us a couple of adult beverages there, first off, cheers. Oh, you're getting one for Mr. Wilson ready.
Well, Mr. Wilson's will get a little colder. That's all. All right.
Perfect.
Cheers, brother. Cheers. And wonderful to see you, everybody.
So let's start with your experience at Mitsubishi and the Wiz, which gives you a different perspective because you had music and technology, and then back into music. And the acceleration of things today is so much faster when you and I first started in the business with DSPs and smart speakers and Bluetooth and CarPlay, music being on a smartphone and an Apple Watch. So where do you see music going, and where do you anticipate that the technology in music will continue to go?
You know, you're going to hear this sort of comment several times throughout the day, which is great music is great music, and if it's not great music, all of these technologies won't matter at all. I'll never forget, there used to be an organization called NARM that's now called the Music Biz, and I'm sitting there watching a panel of the heads of what was then the 6 major music distribution companies, and they're all trying to explain their ways they're going to save the business. And this guy from Chicago, a record retailer named George Daniels, so a real storied character, stands up and he goes, That's all a bunch of bullshit. You can't shine shit, just give us good music. And I thought to myself, well, that summed it up, and for 30 years I've been carrying that as my sort of mantra. You know, I can't do anything to affect my company's P&L if I don't make sure my A&R team is making sure we're not trying to shine proverbial shit. So I hope that, I know I dropped one F-bomb about 10 seconds into the lunch today. I'm going to do my best to refrain myself, but there's no guarantee. So if anybody's offended, they don't know me and they'll probably want to leave. Anyhow, in seriousness, and that is a serious comment, the thing I reflect on is having lived through 45s and vinyl and cassettes and every new technology there was. Remember when we had to lift the needle to find the song we wanted to, those good old days? The best thing about new technologies is reducing friction. And by that I mean reducing I have the thought to I can play that song instantly. I mean, you know, love them or hate them, and I think most people have embraced that streaming is a reality. Boy, is it fun if you're sitting there on the deck with somebody with your Bluetooth speaker, and somebody says, have you thought about that song recently? And in 5 seconds, you've popped it on. And so, you know, my way of running a record label is to keep driving the A&R department to get that right, and then to have a bunch of people who are very smart at the label make sure we're on top of all the new technologies, to be able to find ways to engage fans in the most frictionless possible way. And you know, I don't think that you know, one of the things that resonates with me is that's not at odds with radio. That should be in partnership with radio, because we all have to embrace that. Hell, streaming, imagine, you know, 5 or 6 years from now, we may be thinking that was old school because of we're on the precipice of with the metaverse and Web3, et cetera.
And so you mentioned A&R, and you guys are killing it. I mean, you're killing it. The artists we saw at lunch today. And so when you know, this is one that's not on the list, but you just said it and popped into my brain, is when you're A&Ring, do you think about all the multiple platforms then?
We do our best to avoid thinking about those in the signing process, because all we're trying to do is sign geniuses. And I know that sounds either facetious or too simple, but at the end of the day, you know, our job is to bump into geniuses and give them a platform. But by God, once we've signed them, and that's not to say when we're in the process of pursuing an artist, we're not looking to see every metric, from ticket sales to fan engagement on socials, to if they have music out, what is the consumption on it and everything. But that's a small part of signing them. But once we sign them, it is our job to use every analytical tool we possibly can, especially when we start releasing music, to understand how to understand who their potential fan is and find more of them and get more of them in the room.
I'm gonna come back to that and how you find them and what you do with them. But you came from pop. You have rock in your DNA and the things you've done. I remember seeing you at a charity concert here in Nashville where you tore your shirt open as the lead singer of a band.
That earlier today.
Yeah, it's not what we normally see from executives, but it is you. But so what did you learn from these other formats that was beneficial to you when you came to Nashville? And what hit you about Nashville being different than what you saw when you were in New York and when you were doing pop?
I don't want you to get mad at me for this, but I kept reminding myself it's all about great music. And that having played in bands, boy, talk about market research, it's instant. You play a song nobody wants to hear, you pretty quickly know that nobody wants to hear that, and your job is to generally want to get them to shake their booty, stand up and shake their booty, right? So you're doing everything from that angle. And I remember Kenny Rogers saying something that made me feel a little bit better about coming to run a country record label with no bona fides. And that was, country music is what country listeners listen to, right? And I thought to myself, okay, if it's all about great music, and if I have the right A&R team, and let's be clear, that had to be part of the equation. If I had to start from scratch without Scott Hendricks and Chris Lacey being at that label, I may have been sent back to New York fairly quickly. But with people who did understand the format better and could educate me, my job became more about guiding the efforts of everybody else who was going to give these artists a platform, right? And, you know, I'm happy that people know I'm so passionate about music that coming, in fact, in many cases, because a lot of the artists we've signed grew up listening to the music I used to sell. You know, the number of Jay-Z fans that you know, who enter my office, you think about that, you know, they weren't, their parents might have been listening to the Eagles, but, you know, as they get younger and younger, you sign a 22-year-old today, the chance is they were listening to hip hop. Yeah. And at the end of the day, again, it was all about trying to get people to embrace great music. I know I get a wonderful calling card because artists love my musical language, because I can play. I've sat in the bus with damn near every artist on the roster and played late into the evening. But they want somebody who cares about music, who will do everything to give them the opportunity, and that's what I carry.
Yeah. When you look at Nashville, though, there's a relationship between the record community in Nashville and radio that isn't there in other formats. You know, having had a corporate executive job in a large company that had 500 radio stations and lots of different formats, the closest thing to it was probably urban, but still not as close between the music industry and the label industry. And so when you look at what radio is today, and I don't want to say anything that's going to have people go running, screaming out of the room with great weeping, gnashing of teeth, and casting into darkness, but radio has more competition today than ever before. And so the question that pops in my brain is, how will the relationship with radio and labels continue? Where do you anticipate it's going to go? And is it, I mean, the amount of money that country music labels put into country radio, are you still getting the return, and do you see that continuing?
Well, that last part of the question was a very intriguing part that I think we'll delve into deeper. But it really was pretty magnificent for me to come and find the kind of tight-knit community this town is. And I always find that fascinating, just to use that expression. Imagine if there was a hip-hop town, and then there was the heavy metal town, and there's only one thing that exists like this town. There's nothing where everybody who wants to get to become a famous country star, let's call it mainstream country star, I don't want to offend the Sturgill Simpsons of the world. They moved to Nashville so that they could get a record label deal, and generally they don't move back until they become very wealthy superstars, and then they keep coming to town. That part is amazing to me, but I found this town engaging, and I found in a way that I, with radio and the labels, but also I could go to meet and greets, and Kenny Chesney is rattling off, hey, and he knows every name. And Blake does that, and I'm thinking, these guys have been doing this for 20 plus years. Oh, no. And, you know, that's a relationship that's impossible for me to have processed coming from a world where generally you get your first #1 record, you don't remember how to drive to a radio station any longer, right? So that part I thought was wonderful and something that we should all take advantage of. And you know, the one thing that struck me with your question, in case you didn't know it, I have a couple of notes. I'm trying not to look at them. And I'm doing a fair job of being extemporaneous, okay? Was the part about competitors, and I was thinking, well, are you referring to DSPs as competitors? Who are the competitors? And then I realized, well, that's probably one of them, but it's the noise.
Yeah.
Because when you and I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, well, I had WDVE so I could listen to freeform rock, right?
Yep.
And, you know, the rest of the FM stations seemed to have classical music or PBS, and I wasn't particularly interested. Now, there are so many choices, it's insane. And what that speaks to me of is the need for curation on an even bigger level, because with all of that noise comes attention spans. I think the last time I saw the statistic, the average attention span has gone in 5 years from 11 seconds down to like 3, right? How do you keep that? That's something we all have to work on together. I got plenty of ideas. I do believe that a huge part of it will be from embracing these new technologies together to figure out how to get people to want to turn on to a radio station because they feel like it's a discovery vehicle on a bigger level than they do now. It's still a big discovery vehicle, no question about it. But the big win for us ends up being when you get to the top 20, and inevitably in country music, that's when the streaming numbers, the consumption numbers. Kenny hates the word consumption. I haven't come up with a new one yet to float by him. But, you know, that's when we start making the money. And I'm answering a question you didn't ask. So why do we care? Why don't we just focus on streaming? Because you can't win just on streaming. You just can't statistically in country. You can have some anomalies. You can have some wonderful things. You could, those at the lunch heard that Ingrid Andress is streaming as a top 20 single, and she's not even on the chart yet, right? You can have those wonderful things, but that's not the norm. It's the confluence of that that's a wonderful thing for us and that we want to partner with radio on. But we have to figure out how to get the top 20 a lot faster. And, you know, I'll get into that.
Well, I mean, that segues into my next question, which is, and I'm going to read some stats. I mean, the State of the Country format appears to be in a down cycle, a 4-year down cycle. And those of you who are, you know, corporate programmers in the room who are responsible for more than one radio station know that you're seeing it. You know, there's these guys that are up and down, but as a format, it's down for 4 years. And only 2 formats grew in the last 10 years, according to Edison Media Research. Those were classic rock and contemporary Christian. Those 2 formats, country and new country, so meaning all country, is next to last of the 20 formats that were examined. And so it's a format that's been eroding for a while. And that's a question I'm going to ask Mr. Wilson when he's here as well. But from your perspective, what does country need to do differently? How do we stop that erosion of the audience?
You know, I've never seen a business get healthy by being more conservative. And this may not resonate with people, but we talk a lot as a business about the consolidation of radio. And it's true. I mean, it's sitting there right before us, right? And it led to us doing a pretty big restructuring, reorganization that I hope we can get into before this is done. But my loquaciousness is, I see that clock ticking.
Ignore the clock.
The thing that we have to get our arms around and be honest about, I have a couple of statistics for you. And by the way, this consolidation, I used to live in Princeton, and I used to go to cocktail parties that my now ex-wife would drag me out to with a bunch of people who were not in the music business. Oh, there were some boring fuckers there.
Take a shot.
You mean I could just say it and I get to, okay. And do you know how many times during the nearly 20 years of decline in the music business that I had to hear, are you okay? You looking for a new career? The music company's going out of business. I've been at Warner for 20 years, and I appreciate that, Daddy Warner. Over the course of that time, there were 10,000 worldwide employees when I started. 5 years ago, there were 4,000 employees. So we know what consolidation means, unfortunately, and the record companies have done a lot of damage to themselves through the years. They thought they could shrink overhead and shrink spending to get to a better place. You know what happens when you shrink A&R spending? You don't get artists. You don't take chances. You don't find a new opportunity. And, thank God streaming came along. Yep, it's not like we were geniuses and figured that out. Apple was a good foray into, the next level of at least attracting a younger, more diverse consumer. But at the end of the day, I know what the pain feels like of consolidation. I'm lucky I'm one of the dinosaurs that made it through without becoming oil for the next generation. But we live in a world where 10 years ago, the average time it took a single to chart was a week. We're now averaging 5. If you remove the superstars, 10 years ago it was 3 weeks, it's now 8 weeks. 10 years ago, it took an average of 21 weeks from impact date to achieve a #1 record. And the longest one 10 years ago took 45 weeks. Now singles are taking an average of 32 weeks from impact to #1, and we've had a 72-week #1 record. You understand that an album, a body of work, in order for it to actually get traction, generally needs 2 to 3 songs that people recognize to want to get their arms around it. If we're going to be in a business that takes a year to get a record up the chart, we're not going to be able to put out a new album from artists more than once every 3 years. That is not a business model that we can do, and if we can't survive, I don't know what you're going to play.
Yeah.
So we all have to figure out a way to break that log jam and get new music up the chart faster. Part of that, by the way, and we try to do a damn good job, we're very forthright, and it's never fun with the artist, is we're getting faster at shooting singles, as crass as I can put it, right? In order to clear out so our team is going after something we think might have a greater chance. We need everybody on both sides of the fence to be willing to do that, because part of these wonderful relationships we have also mean, well, I'll keep in it, I'll keep in it, I'll keep in it. Mm-hmm. And if you keep in it, my expression in our building is chart cloggers. We have to all tell each other the truth with real empirical data more quickly and act on it. And that's just the beginning of the iceberg of my feelings about this, but that would be a hell of a starting point.
Yeah, I can completely understand. I mean, in other formats, they do take more chances. They do play songs more quickly. A moment ago, you had mentioned the reorganization you just did and the restructure of the people around the promotion team. And so what's behind that? What was the thinking there?
Kristen Williams, I bless my lucky stars every day that she's in the building. She's, by the way, here's a hell of a statistic. I've been here since September of 2009, so 12 and a half years. There are 3 people out of the 80 people working for me who were in the company the day I got here. Kristen Williams, Scott Hendricks, and Chris Lacey. Thank God they were in the building. And I know she's out there somewhere, so I'm just going to applaud for you, Kristen, because... right? But she and I and Ben Klein, our GM, got to doing a lot of deep dive talking about, we have deployed all these regionals out to radio stations, and it's getting close to 50% of them can't make decisions in the field anymore with top-down programming. Incredibly talented, wonderful people, but, I hate to be so overt, but we're not getting anything done. So we decided that we weren't going to reduce the size of our teams, albeit I'm talking the radio department, but we were going to create an organization that allowed people to be account managers for the program captains of the major companies, and still have a team of people in the field calling on the stations primarily who are able to make autonomous decisions still. And we won't ignore the rest of them, but it's, business is business. If we're doing top-down playlisting from a lot of these companies, we have to go in there and do a better job with them, where it used to really fall on Kristen and Tom Martins to do all the program captain phone calls. So that's a huge part of what it is. We're trying to be more nimble. The account managers will have this very marketing-oriented bent too, so that they can find ways that, hopefully using all these technologies we've talked about up to this point, we can tap into ways to, of course we want to be on the playlist, but there's a lot between 0 and 20 that we could do to be artist development together that has people understand who an artist is. So that's a very simplified way of putting it. And just for one other point, we're always research and analysis driven. We've gone from one person that we hired 9 years ago to a team of 4 people now. One we're hiring who will be in radio, so that we have a full-time dedicated person in providing meaningful, easy to digest data to our radio team and them to the radio community. So people can feel we're not just coming shucking and jiving. The steak dinner, are largely over. The scotches aren't over.
Wait, the steak dinners are largely over?
I know. Some people will no longer play our records. But boy, are we going to come in with the most rich data to accompany the rich music. Now, I know if I don't shut up, I'm not going to have any time for Bill Wilson, who I want to hear talk. Although you're in charge, sorry. You go ahead.
No, that's fine. That's fine. What I was going to say is if any of you have questions for Espo or Mr. Wilson, you can go to the app, plug them in there. RJ Curtis will be reading those to us. We will have times for Q&A. If you want to jump over a seat, I'll let you pour
I will do that.
a Macallan for
and
Mr.
I will
Wilson.
move his Macallan over there.
Our next guest is the Chief Executive Officer for Town Square Media. He has a rich history in the music industry, digital media, and electronic media. He was president of AOL from 2006 to May 2010, where he had overall responsibility for AOL's global content strategy. He was also president of AOL Programming and Studios and executive vice president. Prior to joining AOL, he served as senior vice president for worldwide marketing at Bertelsmann Music Group, which is BMG if you don't know, which he joined in 1992. He started his career there at the subsidiary Arista Records, worked under the amazing legend Clive Davis, segued his way around. As I said, he came from AOL and went to Town Square. This man won an Emmy Award in 2006 for the record-setting Live 8 program and was named to Hollywood Reporter's Digital Power List in 2008. Not a lot of people can say that. Would you welcome Bill Wilson? A pleasure. And that one's yours.
Oh, thank you.
You are welcome. Yeah, right there.
All right.
The most important part. So the comment I hear most about Town Square Media is that it's a digital company that happens to own radio stations. And it's not lost on me, that you have music, you have digital, you have media, radio in your DNA and everything you do. When we were preparing for this, I mentioned a quick story to you. Then at about 2010, I was consulting the stations that Town Square owns in Buffalo. Stephen Price was in the room. I didn't know you were in the room at the time until we started comparing notes. And I just remember being the programming consultant, again, 2010. And he said, we have a theory, 555. And he talked about how 5% of the business would come from this. There would be digital. The air talent were going to write blogs. And you can imagine, after you guys left the room, we were all like, yeah, right. Damned if you didn't do it.
Yeah.
If you didn't do it. Share that strategy, because I don't think a lot of people know where it started and that was the strategy.
Well, I appreciate it. First of all, just an honor to be on the stage with you, Espo. Been a big fan for a long time. And obviously yourself, we've known each other a little while, got to know each other more through this process. But I want to give a big thanks to RJ for inviting me to come down here and be part of this Heads of State, and Kurt Johnson, thank you very much for making this a great CRS. So, Mike, as you said, the strategy from day one from Town Square was we were going to build a diversified local media company. I think some of the misconception about the company is we're running away from radio when nothing could be further from the truth. We loved radio. We're actually acquiring radio stations. We're in the middle of some process now about acquiring more markets. But we always recognized that we wanted to build brands. And a lot of what you just talked about in terms of technology and disruption and leveraging that to actually make local radio brands even more meaningful. So the strategy you mentioned that Stephen was about diversifying revenue, the whole goal was, and he recruited me out of AOL at the time, is what traditional business has diversified and really transformed for the digital age. And back then, I would say it was more print, probably the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, but no real television station, no real radio company. And that's really what enticed me to come to Town Square, to make sure that radio has a thriving future, so that we can use the digital revenue growth and therefore the profit growth to reinvest in local radio. Because in my view, we could never have the digital success we have today without local radio and the local connection. Before I joined the company, I was a big media guy. I was at AOL, so I was New York, Chicago, Nashville, and I had never been to really any of our Town Square markets. And so I went on a trip to make sure I understood what was happening. And the reason I joined the company was sitting in on a morning show in Lafayette, Louisiana, with DJ Digital, and going out to a cafe afterwards, and when people heard his voice, people came over, told them stories about what they had done for the community and their family. And I said, the connection and the power of local DJs, what I call the original social influencers. You think about blogging and what's transformed, and you talk about people's attention span becoming bite-sized. That's what radio DJs have been doing for 30, 40 years, right? Between the songs, within a 2-3 minute break, entertaining and informing. And that's what brought us here. And so back in 2010, as you mentioned, Town Square had 100% broadcast revenue. All we had to sell was local spots. Today, thank God, we're 50% digital revenue and 50% broadcast revenue. Digital is growing 20% a year, and thankfully for us, broadcast is a stable, what I would call a mature cash cow business, but we're able to reinvest in it, I think probably different than some of the other larger players because of the digital growth, and comes back into radio.
Yeah, one of the things that I don't think a lot of people realize is, that you have this company called Ignite, which is a huge national, all of the USA, digital platform for marketing and advertising. And I have to say my ignorance, one of my friends who runs a big ad agency near Cleveland, Ohio, every Friday morning we spend an hour from 9 to 10 solving the problems of the world. And one day we were talking about how he has JD Byrider, these used car sales all over America. And he said, well, I'm pouring a lot of money into Ignite. And I was like, what is that? And he started to tell me, and along the way he said, Town Square Media. And I went, wait, what? And he told me the whole thing. And so give us 30 seconds, 60 seconds on what Ignite is in this huge global platform.
Yeah, in essence, we have 2 digital product lines, divisions, that we started in our radio markets. So what we like to do is incubate, perfect in our local radio markets, but given we're really providing, in this example, small businesses, local businesses, the opportunity for growth. Our job there, as opposed to the audience of informing and entertaining, is what are the local businesses' goals and how can we help them grow and achieve their goals, therefore helps the local economy. So we started 2 divisions, one that you're referencing, which is Ignite, where we sell digital programmatic advertising, so right message, right time, to the right consumer. And we do that in markets outside of the markets that we have radio stations in. The second thing we have is called Town Square Interactive, which we host, build, do reputation management for websites for local businesses. So we started that in 2012 with 40 employees in Charlotte. Today we have 700 employees in Charlotte.
Wow.
And it's this last year, we're about to do our public earnings, but we estimated $82 million in top line and $25 million in bottom line. 60% of our businesses are outside of our local footprint. So we really
perfect what we're doing, but really focused on small town America. Your example here, there's somebody outside of Detroit, as opposed to competing with OMD and the big players in Detroit, we're on the periphery. We like to play where a lot of people aren't.
And so to that point, 322 some radio stations, and some are in big markets, but most are in medium and smaller markets. And so that is a strategy, I'm assuming. I know that from my experience with other clients of mine in the biggest markets, the pandemic saw people lose 40% and what have you. And in my smaller markets clients, some of them were up in 2020 over 19 and 2021 over 20. And so that's obviously a very specific strategy.
Yes, Town Square, very specific strategy. What we call them small and medium-sized markets. As you referenced, our largest market is actually Buffalo. But we are specifically staying outside the top 50 markets. As we've acquired many radio stations over the past decade and currently looking at some additional ones, they will always be outside the top 50 markets. Because in my personal view, it's a different business outside the top 50 markets. Radio means more. So on average, we're in 322 radio stations. We're the third largest provider, third largest owner of radio stations. iHeart at around 900, Cumulus at about 400, and then us, and then it drops off pretty quickly to 200 or 150. So we love radio. We're going to continue to go into radio, but it's a different business in my perspective. So I was about to say, in our 67 local markets, on average, if you look at our 4 FMs and 2 AMs, because that's currently the cap from the FCC, that I know you may not be in favor of this, but we hope as deregulation happens because of the competition from internet and everything. But in our local markets, 1 in 2, 50% of the adult population in 67 markets listens to one of our radio stations. It's incredible. In top 50 markets, that's 20% at best. The number one player would be 20%. Yeah. So to be able to speak to 50% of the adult population and then have a stable radio business and a thriving digital business, quite honestly, I don't think that's possible in the top 50 cities, and I think that's why you see, I was able to watch Bob's presentation, and he's very focused on audio and podcasting, and that's a national play, going more to a syndication model, less local. We're at the exact polar opposite. His strategy, I think, is brilliant for his company, but we are all about local, 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 and staying outside the top 50 markets, because our belief is radio means more there. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, this was accelerated, but over the last 10 years, print publications in our size markets, many of them don't even have a print newspaper anymore. Yeah. They used to publish 7 days a week, went to 5, 3 digital paywalls, and they're still laying off journalists, which is concerning from just a standpoint of people being informed. So we really are filling that void, and we have 70 country radio stations. So we continue to invest in country radio in particular, and I think our strategy, when you hear about Town Square moving forward for the next decade, will always be outside the top 50 markets.
Before I'm going to ask you about the country format specifically, but before I get there, you mentioned localizing, and what I've noticed is that you are starting to do some syndication on your own, although the day parts you're syndicating already have syndication in them, so it doesn't feel like you're eliminating air talent. And I know that, by the way, air talent hates syndication, unless they're the air talent being syndicated.
Yes, very true.
And so, what's your strategy there? What are you thinking as you build out your own format platform?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right on. So about 90% of our content is actually local, but obviously we do have some syndicated content. Most of that 10% that's syndicated is either through a news talk, and we really have a great relationship with Premier and Westwood in that regard. Mm-hmm. And then what we did is we looked at our music formats in terms of syndication, and we were using third parties, and we said, let's take a step back. What we're really doing, and you touched on this, Espo, is building brands, connecting brands with people and building that up. So why don't we build our own music brands? So hopefully you're familiar with Double XL, which is the #1 hip-hop brand. That's a Town Square brand, Loudwire, Pop Crush Nights, Ultimate Classic Rock. So Taste of Country, when I moved over from AOL to Town Square in 2010, one of the first things we did is we wanted our local DJs. Each of our local DJs has to write 2 articles a day, every day, and they have to write local. So we didn't want them to write the same Zach Brown story in 67 markets. So we created Taste the Country. I think Amanda's in the house. She's the editor of that. It's the #1 country music website in America. So we have the #1 country website in America, and we have the #3 in the boot, and Sterling's here in the house for that. We said, why don't we create a nighttime show called Taste the Country Nights. We've got Evan and Billy Dukes in the house who are hosts. We're right here on Music Row and do that daily. And that's our strategy, is be local through most of the day, 8 a.m. through 7 p.m. And then at night, use this incredible platform. So we've got 70 country radio stations, Taste the Country, #1 website and brand, #3 with the boot. It's a digital platform. So we touch 20 million engaged consumers a month on Taste of Country. And then we've got 155 radio stations who actually play it. Half of them are Town Square, and then Compass, I think they may be in the house, great partner of ours. They, in essence, syndicate to another 75 stations that we don't own. So it's an incredible platform. So that's what I would think about Town Square. When we're not doing something local, we're utilizing our touch points to create platforms across every genre of music to really build that connection of what I would call local communities and online communities. So we love local. To me, that's a differentiator for radio. For radio to be relevant in the next 20 years, I believe it has to be local. But that said, there's a place to build brands in certain day parts. So we just announced on the weekends, we were playing, I would say, other people's shows that were potentially promoting competitors' brands or at least substandard. So we actually just hired 6 new people to do syndication on the weekends of these brands. So we'll continue to invest in radio over and over again because we think that's the best way to keep that really relevant to these local communities while we build this adjacent digital business.
I love that scale of justice thing, local and syndication in some of those fringe or lesser day parts, just simply because, I drove 8 hours down here from Cleveland because my wife won't fly. And, when you listen as you're driving and you hear some stations have nothing, they're just playing music and sweepers. And we wonder then why the format is going down or why radio is losing listeners. And we continue to degrade the listening experience. And so same question that I asked Espo, in regard to country music, not country music, country radio, the second lowest format in the ratings. There's a problem. When anything happens, if you have a heart attack and you have one every year, there's a problem. Change your diet. And so there's 4 years of down ratings, but the format doesn't seem to do anything different. And so I'd love your perspective, and I'd love to ask the question, is flat the new up in this format?
Yeah, I don't think so. So I think Espo already touched on some of this, and both of you know more about country music than I do, so I'll just state that up front. There's a lot more informed people in the room on this topic in particular. But I think a lot of the erosion is primarily in the top 50 markets, the PPM markets. The diary markets have performed much better. We're in the heartland. In general, radio, as everybody knows, more people listen to radio than 40 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. The problem is time spent listening has been declining, and country's been a part of that. For our company, thankfully, our time spent listening has been relatively stable, and particularly in country. So is it down slightly? Yes, but I believe, look, in the 80s, it was announced that country music was dead, New York Times, right? And then nobody told George Strait, nobody told Reba. Then it took another dip, then bro country. You look at, say Morgan or Luke Combs, and they became instant superstars, in my view, in terms of time, was a lot quicker then than it is now. My view is that's gonna come back. And I hope Town Square plays a part in that, as you were just describing in terms of what radio needs to do. And I was in the music business in dating myself in the 90s for 10 years. I moved into the music space because I'm passionate about music. And I had no talent in music. I used to DJ. But I always I knew what I wanted to do when I was 12 years old. I wanted to work for either Mo Austin or Clive Davis. Mo Austin at the legendary Warner, or Clive Davis at Columbia at the time, and then Ariston. My blessings, I was able to work for Clive. And I did that since I was 12. I wanted to take somebody who had talent with music and connect them to a fan base. And that's why I really came to Town Square, because I love music, and I think radio is an incredibly powerful platform to do that. Yes, is Spotify, Apple Music, Netflix, whatever you view as competition for people's time. There's place for all of that. I listen to Spotify as well. But radio, to me, you talk to an artist. I talked to one of your artists backstage today at the lunch, which was incredible. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
They talked about the first time almost every one of them, the first time they heard their song on the radio, right? Jay-Z, I've worked with him in the past as well. he will talk about that time. Every artist that I interact with, that's a lifetime memory, and they never forget it. And country music, artists, in my view, it's hip hop and country, but country does it like no other. So I used to work with Aris in Nashville and Mike Dungan and Joe Galante back in the day, go to fanfare. Country artists do what I believe not a lot of artists do, other genre. Yep. They care about their fan base. When they go into a city, they come to the radio station, but more importantly, they connect with their fans. They go to the hospital, visit sick kids. Like, in my view, nobody else does that. And going back to your question, as I'm tying it together, is we've missed that for the last couple of years. That people were not obviously touring during the pandemic. So my view is there's a pent-up demand for live music, human interaction, connections, and as we come out of this, my expectation, I mean, look how much talent we saw at lunchtime. Arrived yesterday morning, I saw other artists throughout the day. So the music, as you said earlier, incredibly powerful. It's not a music issue. It's about how we connect to the consumers in a space where it's very crowded. You know, TikTok, Netflix, whatever you want to talk about. I think radio plays a vital role in that. People for decades have saying radio's going to go away. 8-track went in the car, cassette in the car, CDs in the car, now Apple CarPlay and Android, but it remains relevant. And I think the best thing for us to do, and country has that local connection and that fan connection, and that's what Town Square is all about. That's why we called it Town Square. When you're in these small towns, you wanted to be a business around the town square, and that's where people congregated to talk about what was going on in town, and that's the whole idea of what we are about. And I believe country will thrive, and there's no doubt we're on a downtrend. I think when I'm here next year and the year after, I think we'll be having a very different conversation.
Yeah, all about.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm going to drink to that.
Exactly. Exactly. Here,
I'm
here.
in.
Here. Was an excuse to drink. You had mentioned something about the artist there, and let me remind, if anyone has questions, get into the app, put your question in there. RJ is going to ask those, and the gentleman will answer it. But you mentioned the artist, and I almost said it when Espo mentioned the same thing, the relationship the artists have. Dan of Dan and Shay, who's another Steeler fan like him, and I, will text me during games. Now think about that. Or, you know, there's a country artist that you've seen once, and they walk in the room, and there's nobody that went, this is so-and-so. And they know who you are,
100%.
And they ask things. When I was with Westwood One, we would do Radio Row at the different award shows. And, you know, at the American Music Awards, at the Billboard Music Awards, if Jay-Z got out of the limo and waved over the top of the car at the crowd, that was pretty big. Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman get out and walk over to the people and do selfies. And so that is something that other formats don't have. And back to your point, we obviously need to take more advantage of it.
Completely.
While we're waiting for questions to come in, I want to jump back to you, Mr. Esposito. Diversity within the country music community has become an important conversation. And what specifically is Warner Music Nashville doing around that? And then I'm going to ask you a similar question.
Well, I'll start with Warner Music Group because I'm very proud, and I'm proud that I'm seeing our competitors doing the same thing. We have not only hired an entire DEI team for the globe, not just one person. We can say we started correcting this, but boy, they're giving us homework assignments on the regular. I'm telling you, I'm now learning what an ESG is, an ERG is, and of course DEI, and I feel like there's another. These are not acronyms because acronyms you actually can pronounce. You don't go ERG, ERG, but you know. We have invested a $100 million fund to support diversity in communities. You applied through the Warner website for it. We have now in this space, I'm describing as ERGs, employee. Somebody will tell me what the R stands for. But anyhow, we have people focused on Asian Pacific, on Latino, on Black, on green. I'm happy to say I run the green effort for the globe. which I love, and those people who know my passion for it know that that's actually a very important part of DEI, because the people affected most by a bad environment, by the catastrophe known as climate change, are the disenfranchised communities, right? And that's just scratching the surface of it. But we built a local task force run by our wonderful James Marsh. He's got a crew, and this is specifically in the area of DEI, that they have done seminars for our employees. James is on the CMA DEI task force to try to make change in that organization, which is trying to make change for the country genre or format, or however you word it. And what does all that mean? We are hell-bent on being more diverse and more open and making people feel welcome to come in. And of course, when you think about diversity, you jump to most often because of what happened with George Floyd Black, but it's well beyond that. It's LGBTQX, it is certainly Black, it's API, it's all of that. We have a gal on James' task force, Bree Small is her name, who the company chose to be the key player in helping build this internship program with the historic Black colleges and universities, so that we will, beginning in September, have a outlay of interns that are specifically targeting that. And you know, we all know there's a ton of work to do. There's a ton of work to do, and if anybody thinks there's a fast solution, there's not going to be a fast solution, but you just have to remain dedicated to it. I think when I use the word welcome, we want to be more welcoming. Hell, you remember how hard it was to get women played on radio, sort of still is, you know? You just have to make a conscious effort. I didn't sign any of these gals I referred to at the lunch because I was trying to prove a point that, yeah, we can break a woman. They're geniuses. Let geniuses feel welcome and try to give them a platform. And so, you know, I could go on and on about the efforts that we're doing, but we're just taking the steps we think are necessary, and we're just going to keep course correcting through it to make we want to have more than three, I think it's 3 Black executives in the country music record label side of the business. We just have to make it feel more open, not feel, but be.
Yeah, totally. And Bill, before we get to our first question with RJ, same question. You know, I know your company is working hard and you've made diversity an important part of it. What would you share there?
Yeah, very similar to what Espo said, but we do have a diversity, not an individual, but a council. So we look at it 2 ways. One is internship programs to get new diversity candidates in. We also have partnered with historic Black colleges across the U.S. We're also in a lot of college towns, which helps quite a bit in getting diverse candidates. But you know, I'm really proud that we have 67 markets. In each of our markets, we have a market president. A lot of companies have regionalized. We're going the opposite direction, and half of our market presidents are really, they're the ones who are executing the playbook and making our company great each day and helping their communities. Half of them are women, which I'm very proud of, and a number of them are diverse as well. So we continue to strive in that regard. First, it's got to be a focus and a priority, so thankfully it has been, and I think you'll continue to see progress along that way.
I'm on the board of directors for the Alliance for Women in Media, and there are so many more female market managers today than there were, but we still have a huge deficit with female program directors. There just aren't enough female PDs, and so I love hearing the internship part of it, because we as an industry, if we men don't make that decision, then it's not going to get fixed.
100%, and I want to just give a shout out, because I think a lot of the people in the room know Doug Montgomery works with Town Square, does a great job, and one of his focuses has been actually hiring operations managers, which we call brand managers, to do exactly that, more females coming in from the company, as well as an internship within the program or mentorship program to take female programmers and make them directors of content and ascend up with that skill set, and Doug has done a great job with that.
Excellent. RJ?
Hey, I apologize. Our app is not recording questions, so I'm going to do my best Phil Donahue. God knows I have the hair for it. It's all white. If anyone has a question, I will run to you. This gentleman here.
Mike, you mentioned that contemporary Christian continues to grow, and I happen to program the top show, Keep the Faith. And I think one reason it does is because familiarity matters. we don't change our playlist that often. It's all about the rich content and the stories woven throughout. And I'm just wondering, I mean, we get pressure all the time from the labels to mix it up, change it up, put on new things. And we probably have the slowest change of any playlist of any format in America, but yet radio continues to grow. I think sometimes there's a conflict between radio and the labels. Of course the labels want us to change out, but how can we be better partners in accomplishing what we both want to do?
Let me jump in and just say from a radio perspective for a second, then I'll hand off to Mr. Esposito and Mr. Wilson. You know, let me say this. For 9 years, I was over programming at Cumulus. Stepping away to be a consultant again is so much easier, you know, because now I'm not responsible for generating revenue or stockholders. But one of the biggest problems that frustrates me when I look at country is that if you have 2 country stations in a market, they play the same songs. If you have 3 country stations in a market, they play the same songs. And if somebody would just play something different, that would, you know, you're still gonna both play the hits, but there's not enough difference, in my opinion, in the formats. If you have 2 top 40s in a market, they're doing something different. There's something different between them. One may lean more rhythmic, one may lean more new, one may lean more gold, but you don't see that. And so I think part of the problem with country is one of them have to play more new music to be different and be fresh. And by the way, you know, everything that you see people try in radio, and God knows I've tried a lot of things that failed, but every time you try something new, people line up immediately to kill it, except for those things I tried that worked, then they all rip it off. And so, you know, I would say you can't be fearful of everything. There has to be some differences. Mr. Esposito?
Well, Mr. Esposito. You know, I wouldn't frame how we would express it as we want to have you change things up. I don't know really anything about your business. I barely know anything about the country business. I'm working on it. But the thing is, if anybody who was at the lunch today heard me recite the name of 13 #1 singles that occurred in the last 2 years. And 11 of those came from artists that nobody knew who they were 5 years ago. So we expect, because Blake Shelton was one of them, people are going to keep playing Blake Shelton, you know, and I hope that they will, and, you know, et cetera. But our business depends on the new Dan and Shay, the new Gabby Barrett. I mean, artists who nobody knew, you know, like Gabby Barrett or Ingrid Andress, et cetera, because we need to build tomorrow's superstars. And, you know, there gets a point when you get to be a superstar that #1 records are less important. But boy, in the early days of artist development and trying to get live shows sold, et cetera, radio's role in those chart quotes. In our business, that's what promoters and agents want to hear, and we have to be able to do it. And you know, there's one other point that I'd make in that. This is anecdotal, and I hate anecdotes, as everybody in my label knows. But generally between number 50 on the chart and somewhere around number 30 is a morass of records that just seem to hang there. And they hang there for a variety of reasons. I referred to relationships, things that, you know, help keep these things propped up. And I'm looking at the chart every week. This thing's been in the top, well, between 50 and 40 for 26 weeks. Every one of those spins, which is a record that we could all identify ain't going anywhere, is taking away from us moving another record up that might get a chance to be breaking the next superstar. And that's what I'm yearning for. We do need, and I'll believe me, I go off on this quite a while. We do need to tell the story. We do need, and that's one of the roles that we were talking about backstage. One of the, radio, it doesn't have to only be about the chart if radio works more tightly with us about telling the artist's story and giving context. So at the right time, when we come with the right song and we have enough stuff going there, all the elements are coming in. Wow, I already know this artist. Why not? Why do I? They're not even in the top 20, and it makes it better. This is where we can use new technologies. By the way, I got to say something while I'm so fascinated with this guy. I just met him today. And golly, I'm going to spend some time with you, young man. Holy crap, I've got stuff to learn. Oh, and I mean that.
Do you want to address that question? Ask another one.
I would just say we're a little different because in country radio, we only have 3 reporting stations: YRK, GNA. We got Clay and Company, Chrissy and Brian, and so we're a little different, right? So I think we are able to be better partners to the labels, partly because I came from the labels, but partly because we're not playing that game, and we're not taking an artist for a music festival and trying to sell out 100,000 tickets. So I think that the fact that we aren't reporting stations, we talk backstage, 95% of our revenue is local, so we're not, almost half of our markets aren't even rated, forget about recording stations. So it's really a different game that allows us to partner with labels much more, particularly with artist development. That was one of the reasons we created Taste the Country, right? So if you think about Town Square Country, and you think about 72 radio stations, but then you think about Taste the Country's platform, we reach 20 million, as I mentioned earlier, country music fans every week through our digital platform, and then another 5 on the radio side. So we look at it as holistic, and how do we develop that story and do that in concert with each other? And maybe radio's first, but maybe the digital platform is first. And not only the websites and the apps, but each of Taste the Country has the largest Facebook following, the largest Instagram, TikTok. So think about it as a brand with all these touch points. How we're doing this, to make money, but most importantly to engage the consumer base. Because you can't make money if you don't engage the consumer base. Yeah. And we can do that much more effectively by partnering with labels. So I know we're slightly different because we're outside of the top 50 markets. And going back to your question earlier, it's hard to be disciplined at times because you get so many opportunities, and quite honestly, we're a public company. Investors think it's a disadvantage because there's less money in these small markets, and I just walk away laughing because they don't understand the significant competitive advantage and the marketplace needs. So I think we're in a very unique place. I think Doug, the other thing I mentioned Doug's name before, Doug Montgomery. We have a playbook, but because we're not rated in a lot of markets, we allow our local markets to execute the playbook, but have a lot more autonomy than probably people who have more of a national playlist strategy. So we're a slightly different animal, but I'm glad you asked the question because I think it's vitally important to both of our businesses moving forward.
Well, it's a great question. I've consulted contemporary Christian radio before, and one of the advantages I used to say to people is there are buildings on every corner where your listeners are on Sundays, and that's something other formats don't have. RJ, I can't see where you are.
No, I'm back here. That's it.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry the app did not register those questions, and we'll work on that. But that's all from the audience.
Excellent. Does anybody want to raise a hand if you have a question?
One
or
more.
Anything?
Okay. What's your sign?
What's your sign? Thank you, please, for the gentleman.
All right, let's hear it for our great panel this afternoon. Bill Wilson, John Esposito, and Mike McVeigh. What a great day at CRS.